Hiya! Whisper here with a two-parter. Both the testing as well as some first findings from simulations. I'll have a timestamp in the video so you can do the chapter thing. If you don't care about the testing, you only want to look at the sim stuff that I talk about. But let's get into it. So we did mythic testing for the dragon riding boss. This added a lot more gimmick to the whole thing. So he turns into a bird here, and you'll see little swirly circles. The visibility on this fight is terrible, by the way. But you'll see little circles here. This might be the one where I don't grab it. And so you can see people are flying up. And when they come back down, it does damage to the vines. And they need to soak orbs. So you see that one of these orbs is about to fall. And we're about to wipe. I didn't see it on that pole. Let's see if we can quickly see it on the next. We didn't get very far. But, you know. So here I grab one. It's an extra action button. And then you see I mount. And I just beeline it for one of these. And then I try and grab another one. There's a debuff that makes you take increased damage. So you can only soak one. And you soak one, and then you go dive bomb into the vines here. Boom. And you'll see my damage spiked, right? Let's go back. Let's look at it again. So I mount, fly through an orb. The orb gives me a buff. That buff means when I slam down into these vines, I'm going to do big damage. So you see right now on the bottom here, I have 5 million damage done. And boom. I hit, and it did about 4.5 million damage. Because it hit all of these vines. And that's how you're supposed to free people. So it's a gimmick. It's not particularly great, especially because there's swirls everywhere. And you'll see this very quickly turns into a nightmare situation, because there's just so much to dodge and the visibility is near zero. On top of that, the boss just moves all over the place constantly. I don't know. The dragon riding was fine when it was just the intermission, but this is, I think, pushing the gimmick a little bit too far. And yeah, that's just kind of my opinion on that. We didn't see past the first platform, but it's essentially the same fight, except there's an additional dragon riding mechanic. And you need to go up with 4 people twice per phase. And then, you have your intermission, and that's kind of that. Mythic Plus testing. We also did that. So this is Throne of Tides. It's interesting. They reworked a lot of these bosses. I'm just going to skip through, but this boss, you'll see I get clapped, these geysers. So I just decided that I'm going to step. And there was a geyser there, which I didn't see. And it one-shots you. So, that's a fun time. But it's fine. It wasn't the worst fight ever. It got much worse, though. This fight was a little bit annoying. It spawned little ads, but there was also trash on the side that we didn't pull, so we had to do the trash with the boss. That was kind of annoying. The whole dungeon is very linear. There's gauntlets and stuff, like this gauntlet that I died in. Later on, there's another gauntlet with... not this. Where is it? Yeah, this. So these Tainted Sentries and Unstable Corruptions. It's another gauntlet. And the entire dungeon is basically hold forward, but they added a bunch of mechanics to a lot of the trash and a lot of the bosses. They reworked a lot of bosses. It's not great right now. It's fine. I don't think it's particularly the best dungeon in the world. But I mean, it's a Kata dungeon. The dungeon design to begin with, the linearity of the dungeon isn't great. I don't know. I don't really have much to say about it in terms of constructive feedback, aside from just it's not good. The hallways are cramped. the trash doesn't really make that much sense. Like, when these things die, they give me a stacking debuff, and it just randomly happens to do a ton of damage, but I also can't stop from killing them because it's the gauntlet and they just infinitely spawn. The boss mechanics felt really hit or miss. Like, this puddle here on the ground is going to... I stand in it at one point, and it ticks for all of my health. So you see this puddle spawn sludge. We have to kill the ads. I step in this puddle. You can see my health just disappears. And there's no space to stand in melee anymore. I don't know. It's weird. The tuning is still very weird. The visuals are not where they need to be. It feels like a very early iteration of the dungeon, which is not great. Also, this end boss situation. This is the last boss, by the way. Our Death Knight just kind of soloed it, but you get this huge buff at the end, and he just... I don't know, this last phase was like 10 seconds, and it wasn't even that hard. This phase is non-existent, right? It was just phase 1 that was rough, and then this phase was free. Like, objectively just free. Do I know why? No. Bad design, I guess. But, so that was the dungeon. It's a dungeon, I don't know. What can I say? It's not great. Anyways, so with that and with this out of the way, let's talk some simulation stuff. First off, I'm gonna just go over the dungeon things. Dungeon support in simulations is not quite where I want it yet. I will be working on that going forward. But right now we're sort of in this territory. Let me zoom in a bit. So you want to play Caustic, and you want to play Sanguine Blades, as well as these 4 capstones. You can also play this build right here, drops Arterial, and goes into Dragon Tempered Blades by dropping Zoldyck, so you would take these points out and put them here. That's a little bit more single target for people who are interested in that. I think that's probably the build that we're going to go to. And then this bad one here is a very single target. Well, I say bad, it's 4% worse, right? But that would drop Scent of Blood and Sudden Demise, which removes a lot of your AoE, but you would be able to take more single target, right? Shadow Dance looks very strong. Echoing Reprimand looks pretty weak. Lethality looks pretty good. Cold Blood is... but this is sort of the idea for now. AoE Blind and Blackjack feels really good as well, so I don't really have any issues with that. But basically that's just the dungeon stuff, right? The dungeon stuff, you press Mutilate on something, you Caustic Spatter, you hit it with a King's Bane, you hit it with Deathmark, it does damage, you're good to go. The bleed stuff is really strong. Caustic Spatter, after the recent tuning fixes, have made Sudden Demise really good. Scent of Blood is currently bugged on the PTR, but they are fixing it. It's a bug that they are aware of. So, don't really have much to say about that. Internal Bleeding also has a bug, but it's in simulations. I'll go over that more in the single target ones. Speaking of which, welcome to single target territory. And a lot of you might hate this. This is not what you wanted to see. And I agree. I think this is getting a little bit silly. In this build, we're trying to snapshot with Night Stalker. And what it's created is an opener that is about 20 to 25 seconds long, which is completely scripted. So you will always do the same sort of opener. Sometimes you might mutilate instead of ambush because you don't get a blindside proc, for example. But for the most part, it's the same concept. And there's some really weird stuff going on. For example, you want to Shadow Dance into Kingsbane, then Garrote and Rupture, in that order, because the Garrote is empowered, the Rupture is empowered, the Kingsbane is empowered. But then the question is, well, what do you do with Vanish? you vanish the last 3 seconds of your Kingsbane for Master Assassin. It brings a talent in that wasn't used before, but it feels really weird just putting all your eggs into a Kingsbane basket. And Kingsbane right now is doing, I want to say, like 18% of the damage in single target, which is really, really strong. And it's kind of warping the entire spec at this point. The class tree is completely dominated by Shadow Dance because of the snapshot technology with Night Stalker increasing the entire duration of Kingsbane, Garrote, and Rupture. So I have a comparison here. You'll see that like changing Improved Ambush to Tight Spender is kind of whatever, Virulent Poison for Deadly Precision is kind of whatever. But once you get into the actual meat of the situation, dropping T for Lethality, this is prime Kingsbane damage. Lethality is a big Kingsbane buff, but dropping Thistle T for Lethality, not worth it. And it's really bad from here. Dropping Shadow Dance is 2.5%. It's weird, and even then you would still kind of take Night Stalker. Dropping Shadow Dance and Night Stalker entirely, you'd take Lethality and Tight Spender, but there's not really much there. Cold Blood is also like 2.5 to 3% worse. You could drop Deeper Stratagem for the same amount of loss, but really it's just Shadow Dance or bust. Which I hope that they take a look at, because right now it's pretty bad. Sanguine Blades was something that some people wanted to see in single target, myself included, because it brings in pooling aspects. I'm a big fan of this. I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of it, but for me personally, this is a really exciting ability for me. It sucks. It's really bad. In Mythic Plus, it's good enough to buff the Crimson Tempest damage to where it's worth it, and you also have enough bleeds going out to where the energy is just completely irrelevant. So you don't have a downside in AoE, and the Crimson Tempest damage carries it. In single target, it is just nowhere near where it needs to be if it wants to be viable. You really need like 3 targets and Carnage to really buff this up, get the energy going, and then get the Crimson Tempest damage rolling. So, in my opinion, I feel like they would need to nerf the Crimson Tempest damage and then buff Garrote and Rupture. So, for example, putting Garrote and Rupture to duplicate 40% of the damage, but making Crimson Tempest duplicate 10% of the damage. That would spread it out, but also make it a little bit more viable in single target, so you don't have this crazy ramp where it's completely worthless in single target, but then really, really strong in like 15 targets, right? Kind of spreads the wealth out a little bit, so it's not too crazy and doesn't scale too fast. I think that would be good. That'd be my suggestion. Caustic Spatter is fine, but again, since everything on Caustic Spatter hinges right now on Kingsbane, you're looking at Kingsbane damage for Caustic Spatter, which means you're snapshotting again. So I think that Caustic Spatter probably could use a buff. But the only way that this ever gets a buff is if Kingsbane isn't doing a ridiculous amount of damage. So we're back to this dichotomy of like, well, it should be better, but there's something wrong with the spec. I say wrong here in quotes, but the spec tuning makes it so that it's hinged on one thing, right? In terms of Sanguine Blades, it's hinged on Crimson Tempest in AoE. In terms of Caustic Spatter, it's hinging on Kingsbane snapshotting. So all of these effects together have their own issues. Sanguine Blades needs to be stronger, but Crimson Tempest is cranking a lot of the value here. Caustic Spatter needs to be stronger, but it's all Kingsbane right now. Kingsbane is hard carrying the effect. The tier set also, it got buffed, but it needs more. It's still doing about 1.5%. And here's the same tree, but a comparison of the spec tree stuff. Internal Bleeding is an interesting one. It's still kind of bugged. So I wouldn't really trust this for now. There's some pandemic it's in Sims it's pandemicking, but Deathmark adds a second one because it ruptures a second time. So it's a little bit weird. Sense of Blood shows up, but I have an override in, so this is actually Sense of Blood, and it's 0.5% worse. I didn't sim every combination of the sun, obviously, but you can see that it very quickly drops off. There is one way to play it, and that way to play it is... It's essentially just you need to snapshot Kingsbane. So that's sort of where we're at right now. Obviously this character is scaled up to 485. I just kind of slammed item level on my gear, tier set, and then I used some new trinkets. The stats on this doesn't really matter. In general, from what I've seen, I took a quick look because I know a lot of people have been interested in asking. Stats don't really change. We're still crit, mastery, haste. In what balance those stats will be, I don't really know. But I don't think you can really go wrong with mastery. I think mastery is looking very strong, especially since our AoE tools now, this is basically just mastery damage. It's bleed damage, which is mastery. Caustic Spatter is from nature damage sources, Kingsbane, Envenom, Vicious Venoms, right? This spatters as well. Poison damage, so all of that is mastery. Kingsbane is mastery. Snapshotting bleeds is mastery. Vicious Venoms and single target is really strong. That's mastery. So I think that if I had to gut reaction what stats you should be playing in 10.2, right now we're looking at crit mastery, the same that we were in 10.1. Haste might come up as a way to get more stacks for Kingsbane, but as of right now, I don't really think that it's too impressive. And versatility still kind of sucks. It's okay, but it's in no way a stat that you should be stacking. And that's about it. Simulations are still ongoing. The APL here is not public. I'm still working on it. And it changes literally every couple hours as I find something new. So I'm working hard on getting this done before the patch releases. Single target sims are kind of there where they should be. Mythic Plus needs a little bit of work on some of the effects, and we'll see. But Assassination so far is feeling really good in testing. I do have some concerns, mostly about Shadow Dance and snapshotting and how strong Kingsbane is. I think it's pigeonholing us into a very specific type of build, which I don't particularly enjoy. I'm not a big fan of snapshotting. And yeah, that's about it. They did announce PTR testing for next Friday, but it says to be determined, so I don't know what boss that's going to be. And in the future, I don't really have any content lined up in terms of YouTube. I will be streaming some of my simulation process on Twitch. If you guys have any ideas for what you want to see on YouTube, let me know. Some ideas that I had floating around in my head, for example, what should I do to prep for the patch? I don't know how much content's there, but I can talk about that. I can also talk about some niche situations, right? Some random theory crafting stuff, like what do we do in 3-target? Those are all things that we can talk about. Gear-wise, trinket comparisons, talking about the tier set. The 4 set still obviously needs a buff. But yeah, if you guys have any topic that you want to see me talk about, let me know in the comments. And I will see you guys next time. Bye. I can't find the button. Bye.